My name is Debbie Irving, for people who don't know, and I've sort of become a poster child for how not to engage in racial equity work. So that might seem counterintuitive, but I really want to thank Dr. Martin for putting me on the program, because I hope, should I be using a different mic?
If you want to walk around.
I just want to be able to look there, but thank you, everyone. As a former teacher, that's called setting me up for success. Thank you. So anyway, I'm thankful to Dr. Martin for putting me on the program, because I'm hoping that other people can learn from my mistakes. That's what all my work is about. So here's the thing about me. I was always for racial equity and racial healing. I was really passionate about it. And I understood that it would make communities stronger, schools stronger, cities stronger, but I had, it turns out, a really limited understanding of what racism was. I thought it was about people not liking each other. And I was so wrong. Turned out that there were a number of invisible to me forces undermining my best intentions, and I have chosen 3 of them to share with you today. Underminer number 1 was bias and stereotypes, not what you think. When we talk about bias and stereotypes, a lot of times the focus is on someone other than us. This is the kind of bias and stereotype I had no idea I had been exposed to again and again and again. Ideas about white as right. Ideas about what it means to be an American, about what's normal. For me, that was all around whiteness. I didn't understand that I'd been taught that white is the knowing group, white is the friendly group, white is the group that leads, and had always been this way. In my little childhood mind, at least, that went just back to the beginning of U.S. history. And I was exposed to these ideas every single day without even knowing it. Did your parents explain to you why only white men were on our currency? If not, there's a chance some of these ideas are in your psyche too. And this is bias and stereotype as well. Okay, underminer number 2 was that I was missing so much history. I had no idea that I had been taught in school, in my home, in my movies and my books. I had been taught a very narrow version of history. And by the way, I was a history major in college. And this is what my U.S. history books looked like. So, for instance, I'm going to share with you 2 examples of how this shows up. And history lives today. We're living in history that was created for us yesterday and the day before and the year before and the century before. So this stuff, history really matters. I knew all about World War II. As a child in the 1960s and 70s, I was surrounded by World War II veterans. We called them GIs. I was surrounded by images like this. Anyone noticing that they're all white again? Even recent, fairly recent, Saving Private Ryan, again, portrayed World War II veterans, soldiers, as white. So I had no idea that there were 1.2 million black Americans fighting in World War II. Not in my history, not in my textbooks, not in my media, my movies, my TV shows. I didn't know there were indigenous troops. I didn't know there were Asian troops. I didn't know there were Mexican troops. This is what's called whitewashed history. So when this is all I see and know about, my father was in the Navy, which is why I chose this image, and I learn about something called the GI Bill, which for returning World War II veterans was a benefits package. It paid for returning veterans to go get free higher education, get a loan to start a small business, and it provided a government-backed mortgage to go buy your first home. So when I hear about the GI Bill, I'm not thinking, did everybody get that? No. Most of the black and brown, and when I say most, I mean all, with very few exceptions, of the black and brown Americans who had fought in World War II were not able to access the GI Bill benefits. I don't have enough time to go into the whole story, so I will pick one piece of the story. When it came to buying a home with one of those government-backed mortgages, they were only good in white-only neighborhoods. So they were only available to white GIs, like my father and my uncles and all the men that I grew up around. What's a white neighborhood? Well, More history I didn't know. I didn't know about the history of redlining. I didn't know that cities all across America in the 1940s and 50s had laid out maps of their areas, and they had determined who could live where and where loans could be made and who could buy homes where. So this is Boston, Massachusetts. The practice is called redlining. The redlined neighborhoods are neighborhoods that were inhabited by black and brown people exclusively, and the dark green were where white people lived. And the other two shades were some kind of a mixture. But that GI Bill only offered government-backed mortgages in those green areas, which were populated by white people only. Imagine going to fight Hitler's Germany and coming back and facing that kind of racism in your own country. This was not a Boston issue. This was all over our country. And these housing footprints are very much intact today, all over the country. And so, if I don't know this history, which I am admitting I didn't, that set me up to buy into that myth of meritocracy, that we all end up getting what we get based on individual merit and hard work, and not, as I now understand, of course hard work is involved, but there's a disproportionate allocation of resources by decision makers who look like those white leaders. And that's a part of our history. So if I don't know this and I'm buying into the myth of meritocracy, I think everyone has an equal shot. I, who grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts, which is up on the top, am very likely to take a look, and I absolutely did, take a look at one of these economically castrated neighborhoods on the bottom and think, geez, those people don't know what they're doing. And I'm part of a group that really, we've got our act together. We work harder, maybe we're smarter, maybe we care more about education. So not understanding this history, as passionate as I was about racial justice, racial equity, set me up to go in with an attitude of superiority. Not very welcome. That's not going to do a very good job at creating those bonds. A little more history I knew about Columbus. I knew about the Pilgrims. Learned lots about that, was reminded year after year after year after year, but I never heard the other side of the story. I didn't know how indigenous people spoke about this chapter in history. I never thought about, as I went romping all around Massachusetts, that I was actually standing on land that indigenous people would describe as stolen land. And I didn't know that someone like me was attached to a history that was considered a genocide, that someone like me is attached to a history where I might be looked at as an invader or a terrorist. So that this idea of being attached to really one of the greatest genocides in the history of the globe means that anywhere I go, whether your ancestors were here then or not, white skin can carry with it all this history. And all I have to do is walk into a room, and that history that I trigger in another person, it makes me immediately distrustful, possibly. I had no idea. I just thought we were all colorblind and we should all just get along and be a big, happy family. So that undermined me a lot. The final underminer was the whole idea of social roles. So again, 60s, 70s, I know this has changed a little bit, but I would argue not all that much. Especially not since, what was it, 11/9? There was this patriarchy idea. I saw it happening in my household, and I saw it happening all around me. Once again, father knows best. Through history, and I saw that woman's role was to be helpful, to take care of, to help and teach, especially the needy. So if I go into neighborhoods, again, and I'm trying to cross a class divide or a racial divide or any kind of a divide, and I don't know the history of how that divide got laid down or how it's percolating in my psyche, I'm completely unprepared to show up and embody a role of a racial equity warrior in which we're struggling together to share the stories that Mayor Walsh is talking about in a way that's equitable. So I'm not going in to help and fix. I'm going in to be in a struggle with. And what I wish I had known is that these things, not only are they, should I not feel ashamed of them, but revealing them is a huge part of the process of healing. As Jim Rooney says, it's all about getting the crap out, or exploring our crap together. And you know, it always feels good to get the crap out, doesn't it? So I wish I'd known these things. And I hope that these lessons will be useful to Boston going forward. And I have a lot more if anyone wants to hear them. If this is what we're looking for, I think there's really no way to get there without making the invisible visible. Thank you.